So quick round of introductions here this evening. As you see on your screen there, our main man, Mr. Hockaday, there to keep us all in line and on track for the evening. I am Brian Hodson. I am the mayor of Canby and your co-chair for C4. And as always, very thrilled to be here. Happy New Year to all of you, and hopefully everyone had a safe time. So we'll just kind of work around my screen here. Kenny.
Hello, I'm Kenny Cernak, representative for the Hamlets.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hilliard.
Yeah, I'm Mark Hilliard. I'm with the Beaver Creek Hamlet and listening in and possibly seeing what moves forward with this.
Excellent. Well, welcome, sir. We've already met Mr. Kaiser, but I'll give him a minute.
Scott Kaiser, Mayor of Molalla, the most beautiful city in Clackamas County.
According to some. That's great. For those, yeah, sorry. Mr. Mayor Kaiser and I being neighbors, yeah, we like to take jabs at each other. So if you ever want to move closer to the action, I suppose we could pick on Mayor Buck here later, which we'll get to. Mr. Gornick, good evening.
Hello, Paul Gornick from Oak Lodge Water Services, representing sanitary districts.
Excellent, thank you. Ms. Muller.
Heidi Muller, I'm with Canby Area Transit and the transit coordinator, and I'm representing our small rural transit district providers.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Myers.
Good evening, everyone. Martin Myers. I'm the C4 CPO rep, and I also am with Redland Biola Fishers Mill CPO. Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Morrow.
Good evening, everyone. Adam Marl, Oregon City Commissioner, and also co-chair of the C4 Toll Strategy Subcommittee.
Excellent. Mayor Milch.
Good evening, Mayor Michael Milch of the City of Gladstone.
Welcome, sir. Councilor Sherman.
Happy Valley City Councilor Brett Sherman, also a member of the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, and I'm just here basking in the glow of Mayor Kaiser.
I love it. Miss Pratt, good evening.
Valerie Pratt, Tualatin City Council, the most beautiful city that's both in Washington and Clackamas County.
Love it. Miss Stavengard.
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Stavengard, Milwaukee City Council. I guess this is where I say Milwaukee's the best city north of Gladstone.
I'm noticing a trend. This is good. Rebecca, I do have to ask, so do you play that guitar that's on the back wall?
Yep. When I'm not in C4 meetings, I'm melting faces.
Yes, I love it. Mayor Buck.
Hi, good evening. Joe Buck, representing Lake Oswego, the only city in Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. We have 2 people.
Excellent. Mr. Bielostowski.
Hey, Brian. Hi, everybody. Rory Bielostowski, the mayor of West Lynn. Glad to be here with you all.
Excellent. Welcome, sir. Mr. Brashear.
Good evening, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I am the transit director for South Metro Area Regional Transit, City of Wilsonville, and the only smart person on this call.
I see our year is off to a rip-roaring start tonight, so perfect. Miss Baumgardner, good evening. How are you?
Thank you. Good evening. And it's nice to see all of you, even if we can't see each other in person. Mary Baumgardner, City Council President for West Lynn.
Welcome. Thank you. Miss French. Sherry, you want to try that again? You were muted.
My family would love that. Sherry French, Clackamas River Water.
Perfect. Welcome. Council President Hensley.
Hello there, Council President Hensley, City of Canby.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Hockaday, you want to run? We have a lot of people in the other chat room. You want to introduce?
I'm sorry, in the other chat room. So yeah, we have a few staff as attendees joining, including a few from DTD. Looks like Mindy Garlington is also on. Trent Wilson is on as an attendee. And we have Adela from ODOT.
Wonderful. Welcome to all of them as well. Well, as I said, Happy New Year to all of you. Does anybody have any interesting New Year's resolutions that they want to share? Wow, no resolutions or just none that you want to share?
Did we skip Mayor Bielostowski? I didn't. Maybe I wasn't hearing.
No, he did introduce himself. And all of his pedigrees following that as well. So, all right, no New Year's resolutions. Okay, well, I'll share mine. Eat more barbecue, drink more bourbon, and smoke more cigars. So there's mine.
I like
Okay.
that.
All right, so I need a motion to approve the November 2nd, 2023 C4 minutes.
Move to
So
approve.
moved.
We'll go with Mayor Buck with moving. Mayor Kaiser, can I put you down for second? Perfect. So moved. All those in favor? All right. Anyone opposed? All right. Looks like those pass. Thank you very much. All right. Next on our agenda this evening is the C4 Toll Strategy Subcommittee updates. And with that, I think we have Jamie Stasny and Mayor Bieltowski. Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Chair
Happy New Year.
Hudson, C4 members. Happy New Year. It's nice to see you guys. I'm Jamie Stasny. I'll introduce myself. Jamie Stasny from DTD, Clackamas County, for those that don't know me. I'm here tonight just to provide you all with a brief introduction to the next agenda item and a little bit of context. And that agenda item is called ODOT's I-205 toll scenarios. We've been talking about tolling for years here. So when we talk about toll scenarios, it can mean a lot of different things. So I want to just rewind us back a little bit to talk about what happened over the last year, specific to 205 tolling, which brings us to where we are now. So you'll recall that February, I guess it hasn't quite been a year ago, ODOT issued a draft environmental assessment for the 205 toll program. I know y'all remember that because we sat in here and talked about it. And then we all worked together. We had a lot of conversations. Your staffs were very involved. And then we all submitted a response or various responses to that draft environmental assessment for the 205 toll project in April of 2023. May of 23, Governor Kotek issued a pause on toll collection, which we also talked about here. Governor Kotek, and that plan identified a reduced scope for the 205 toll project. No longer was it including the 7-mile section and the third lane. Now the project had been shrunk down to just being a point toll on the Abernathy Bridge. And later that fall, we learned ODOT would be issuing a supplemental environmental assessment, just covering that point toll on the bridge. Fast forward a little more, gets us to the November RTAC meeting, which is where ODOT shared what they called the Abernathy Bridge toll scenario trade-offs. The presentation for that from the meeting is actually in your packet. So I know you've all read up on that. I'm not going to bore you by showing you the entire presentation because I know you've probably taken a look at it or you can. But I did want to flash a couple slides up for you. If I have a share option, which yep, I do. Excellent. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to flash this up just so everyone's on the same page of what we're talking about here. So ODOT said, let's talk about these I-205 toll scenarios. Can you see my screen? Excellent. So this slide talks about what those scenarios are. There are there's a no build scenario. We've talked about this here as well, but just a refresher. And then 4 different scenarios, which are numbered 0 through 3. The first is a base toll only Abernathy Bridge approach. And the second one is basically that same scenario, but less of a variable toll. So different ways of structuring this tolling. The scenario 2 was basically the original, but higher peak tolls to try and help manage congestion. And then the last one included higher tolls to try and raise more money. And they looked at various different, and I'm going to switch to one other slide here. They looked at a whole bunch of things like how much net revenue can this raise? What are the impacts to traffic? What are the impacts regarding diversion? And they provided this high level scenario and information. That presentation was met with a request for ODOT to show their work. And I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see your faces. So the RTAC members said, hey, thanks for this. We have a million questions. And most importantly, the question was about revenue, because all of this information included a lot of details about net revenue. But we all know from our 3+ years of work on tolling that there's also a gross revenue number somewhere that exists, right? If you get to a net revenue number, somewhere there's a gross revenue number that shows the total amount of revenue that will be generated. And that was not shared. So I would say a broad, coordinated chorus of RTAC members said, show your work, we want these gross numbers. And so on December 15th, the group received additional information, a lot of additional information, tiny little print, a lot of it. And so many of us took one look at that and thought, how in the heck are we ever going to analyze this? It's really challenging to understand unless you are a financial analyst, which I know some of you are. But for some of us that don't do that in our day jobs, it was a lot of information that needed to be sifted through and synthesized and organized in order for folks to be able to understand it. And so in just a minute, I'm going to turn this over to Mayor Bielosowski, who has done that work. He really has worked so hard. He's been working with me, with our staff team, asking questions. We've been talking, and he has put together an amazing presentation, analyzing all of that information in a way that everyone can understand, even me, who is a land use planner, right? He has done such a great job. So just really quickly before I turn it over, I want to say that this information on these scenarios is going to be used when ODOT goes to the OTC on January 24th. They're going to say, okay, OTC, which of these scenarios should we evaluate in the supplemental environmental assessment? So this kind of lays down the path for the next step for them to evaluate tolling on I-205. And the last thing I'll say is that our staff team did submit a technical letter responding to this information, and that is on the record. So we can share that with you all, but just wanted to let you know that that is on the record. So with that said, Mayor Hudson, I see you have a question.
I do. Thank you, Jamie. So I guess it's on the revised 205 toll project description. I'm not seeing, and as I read this, am I reading this correctly that the only toll gantries are going to be right around the construction area of the Abernathy Bridge?
That is correct, Mayor Hudson. The new plan is for them to just essentially have a gantry on the bridge, 2 gantries on the bridge. So they capture the trips that are just going over the bridge. They are not going to include any other areas of I-205 in the 205 toll project. But that said, we all know that the regional mobility pricing project is coming right on the heels of the 205 toll project. And last time we saw information, it appeared that the rest of the area that was previously going to be part of the 205 toll project will likely be lumped into the RMPP. So it will be tolled anyway without the additional lane, but it will be in that separate project. So I know it's clear as mud, but does that make sense?
No, it does make sense on how you explained it. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense from an ODOT perspective. And if I think like a greater or higher level bureaucrat, I'm looking at this as why create 2 separate headaches, and why not just make one, put it in, and be done. Again, I'm speaking in the affirmative because I think no matter, I mean, we've done a tremendous job as a coordinating committee, as a group of cities and staffs throughout Clackamas County, trying to raise a much awareness and consternation on this whole thing. I still think we're going to see it happen. It's just an interesting approach, I think, that ODOT is taking. So my other question I had was when you pulled up the scenario for trade-off analysis, you know, they're targeting $400 million in capital funding. What is that time frame? Is that annually, over 5 years, 10 years? What is that time frame?
Thing is that analysis is over 30 years.
30 years.
Yes, and Mayor Bialystowski, go ahead.
It totally depends on, to make this even more confusing, they're using two different funding sources for the bridge project: a loan from the federal government, a TIFIA loan, and toll revenue bonds. They each have different periods that they are paid back by. One is 30 years, one is 35 years. So really, the spreadsheets all show 35 years of analysis for revenue.
Okay. And I'm supposing that all of our stomping of feet and ranting and raving means that $400 million over 30 years will all be spent within that tolling area of our community or our county, correct?
So the OTC made a finding early on, or set a policy, that money generated in a corridor remains in that corridor. But what is a corridor is the question that I have, or what is the 205 corridor? Because 205 is a lot larger, right, than just that one area. So I think we have a lot of questions about that. And I actually think Mayor Bialystowski is going to get into that a little bit, and it speaks to net versus gross revenue as well. So the questions are, how much money will there be, and how will it be spent, and where will it be spent? So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Mayor Bialystowski so he can share his.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody in advance for listening. And I don't know how I became the person who looked at these numbers so closely, but I guess I'll to share in more in a minute, but after an RTAC meeting, I submitted a public records request to get more information. And that's the source of a lot of the information. I'm going to share a slideshow really quick with everybody. Really quick, just a few slides to go through, and it might kind of blow your mind. It's blown my mind as I've gotten into the details. Can you all see this full screen on your screens? Okay, so let's just get started. I thought, I wanted to ground everybody in the purpose. Why are we setting up, or why is the state setting up tolls at the Abernathy Bridge? And this document is from the supplemental environmental assessment that's going to come out soon. This is the kind of the foundational statement for what we're doing. The purpose is to use tolls at the Abernathy Bridge to raise revenue for reconstruction of the bridge and support congestion management. Those are kind of the dual purposes for this project, as stated by ODOT. This comes from an ODOT document. But an important point to note is that ODOT has acknowledged that congestion management really doesn't happen from this project unless toll rates are set incredibly high, which results in a ton of diversion. So this is a bullet point from the document that kind of had the takeaways from this comparison of the trade-offs of the different scenarios. And it says, I want to read it for everybody. A point toll at the Abernathy Bridge is not the best tool to manage congestion for the 7-mile stretch of 205. Without the implementation of RMPP or construction of the third lane, toll rates would have to be set at much higher levels to achieve significant congestion relief. The consequences associated with high toll rates would include high levels of diversion and greater financial impacts to customers. So the point of saying that is that really the only purpose with that, now that congestion management is kind of not happening, is raising revenue for the project to fund the bridge. The construction project that we've talked about. The latest estimate, I think, was 662 million. Jamie might have more information. And some of that's supposed to come from tolling. So back in November at RTAC, ODOT presented these numbers that are highlighted in the green here on the right, which is the funding capacity for tolling, which basically means how much funding in the form of loans or bonds for the Abernathy Bridge project can be generated from tolling revenues after all other expenses or administrative expenses, et cetera. But the major question that was unanswered for me and others was, what are the gross and net tolling revenues required to reach these numbers, this funding capacity that you see on the right here? This led to my public records request that I submitted back in early December. And this is just one more example. It's Commissioner Savas, who's not here, but has brought this chart up before. This was from a memorandum that ODOT distributed, kind of talking about showing the different scenarios. So you got, scenario 0, tolls 75 cents, 225. Scenario 1, $1 to 180. Scenario 2, which has been deemed very unlikely. This is looking at, if you are just using tolls to manage congestion, what do the tolls have to be? Causes a ton of diversion. That's $0 to $5.60, and then 3 is 75 cents to 275. And I want to just take a moment here to distinguish between this column here on the right, net toll revenue resources, versus net revenue. So the net tolling revenue is the amount of money left over after you take out the administrative costs. You have the gross revenue, you subtract the net revenue to get the administrative costs. This number on the right is when you use that net revenue that you have left over, and you basically take out debt with it. How much, when you're projecting into the future, taking out bonds and loan based on projected net revenues. So this is not the net revenue for tolling. As you can see, this is how much is generated to basically meet the project purpose. So a couple of years after tolling starts, or when tolling's starting, ODOT will go and enter agreement with lenders to get this amount of money based on how much they forecast bringing in over the 30-year period in tolling. And these numbers are critical on the right here. More on that in just a second. So this was what was turned over to RTAC and myself in response to my public records request. Several key points are on these spreadsheets. There were 4 of them turned over. They were in the packet that I think you all got. And there's a couple key columns. This is hard to read. I know I'm not wanting everybody to, you don't have to zoom in and see everything, but my analysis focused on the thing in the green at the bottom, which is the totals over the project period. And things like this column right here, 16 is the adjusted gross revenue for scenario 0, $2.7 billion almost in revenue raised. You subtract out almost over $1 billion. And these costs, these are all the administrative costs, so some of them, not all. And then you get to the net revenue. And a couple will come up later in the presentation. The state and consultant operations costs, 19. And what I call the big winner from column 22. This is the customer service center operations vendor costs. And as an example, in this scenario, $530 million goes to this vendor to run the customer service center of the tolling revenue raised from our communities. So this is kind of a summary of the major findings from the spreadsheets compared with the funding generated for the bridge in loans and bonds. So for like scenario 0, you got 369 million generated, but it takes almost $2.7 billion to generate 369 million. When you look at the ratios, it's basically $7.28 for this scenario per dollar of bridge funding capacity generated. And it's between $6 and $7 for each one. And this scenario 2, of course, is the one that's almost been ruled out at this point already because of diversion impacts and high costs. This is kind of a visualization for everybody to see the difference. So this is how much you generate in loans and bonds, and the black column on the right is how much is required to generate that much in revenue once you subtract everything else and then you finance all of your revenues to get the bonds and loans. And at the end, I'll take questions, happy to talk about anything more in detail. One other thing to mention is the administrative costs. We've all been talking about that. When you take the gross revenue from the spreadsheets and subtract the net revenue from the spreadsheet, it equals about $1 billion, depending on scenario, 968 for this one, 1.1 for the others. Then there's another cost that was not included in the operations and maintenance component, but I classify it as an administrative cost. It's total equipment repair and replacement and vendor reprocurement costs. So I add those back in to get a total forecasted administrative cost around 1.1 to 1.3 billion, depending on the scenario, in tolling revenue. And this is one other kind of last piece that I wanted to share with everybody. This on the left here is the same number that we've been talking about with regard to how much in loans and bonds is generated for the Abernathy Bridge project after everything else. And this column is from the spreadsheets that is the total toll revenue spent on the customer service center vendor. And in almost all scenarios, the amount spent on the vendor to run the customer service center exceeds the amount in funding generated for the bridge, the purpose of the project. And then when you add in customer service center costs from here with the other column, state and consultant operating costs, it almost in all scenarios it exceeds the amount generated for the bridge by far. The only one that's close is scenario 2, but it's still exceeding it by the amount generated for the bridge by $50 million. And this is a graph showing the same in a visual format in case there's some visual folks that prefer visual data. But you got the total funding generated for the bridge in loans and bonds, revenue spent on the customer service center, and then when you combine the customer service center and consultant state costs, it exceeds it in all scenarios. And one parting message to share with everybody as I finish my presentation is tolling is pretty inefficient, very inefficient, unbelievably so from my analysis. But the EA that we received last spring showed that 75% of trips are local, meaning they enter or exit 205 at one of the 5 interchanges in the project area. And so to me, it's like that means potentially 75% of billions of dollars will come from our own communities, from people here at this table. And so, you know, the question is, should our communities bear the billions of dollars of cost for this system in addition to the bridge? So anyway, it's what I was thinking about today as I put this together. And I will stop sharing. So thanks everybody. Jamie, anything to add? I put this together myself today, but been working with Jamie to just coordinate.
Rory, this is excellent. I mean, I shouldn't say that I'm not surprised, but I think when you put it up in the bar graph, that last one that you posted in your presentation there, that's very disheartening to see for sure. Mayor Kaiser, question, sir.
Have they named the company that's going to be handling the customer service by chance, Roy?
And not at this time, but I do know from hearing from others that there's not a company that does that in Oregon. So and few in the United States. It could be someone out of state, out of the country that gets that money.
I'm just curious if whatever company they end up deciding to use, how much they decided to contribute to campaigns in Salem this year or the last election.
Mayor Kaiser, that's being very conspiracy theorist of you this early in the year. Councilor Sherman.
Very good, Mayor B, nicely done. You know, it's I think it's interesting, and I guess maybe a question for you. I don't know if you dug deep enough, but so you know, the net revenue generated, call it a 1.5 billion plus or minus a couple of bucks in scenario 0, that turns into 400 or 500 million plus or minus a couple of bucks. I mean, is that debt servicing cost and any other kind of, and you know, there's a delta there that's pretty substantial, and I'm curious, is part of that they're building in extra fluff for like future things? Is it that that there's just that much leakage in the portfolio and the entire process. I mean, to get us to a point where you're like at 15% net revenue realized is, you know, any business would go out of business in that scenario. So I'm not sure how that makes sense. And I will say you even kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt in some of the numbers in that, you know, you use the adjusted gross revenue generated for your, you know, your denominator. And so even that, if you build back in the unpaid tolls, you know, they're actually billing more than that to the tune of like $200 or $300 million that they expect won't be billed. But one would assume that they will also turn that over to some kind of, they'll sell that debt to some kind of collection agency that's going to go after residents of Oregon to try to collect that money and potentially put people in jail for not paying their tolls, which are typically going to be the low-income people that haven't subscribed to the low-income process. So there's a whole bunch of problems in this scenario, and we're collecting an incredibly low amount of money. So, I mean, as you craft the message that you plan on sharing, are you speaking at the Gladstone deal, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
I will be there.
So I'm just kind of, I mean, and I won't jump ahead to that part of our conversation tonight, but, you know, as you craft that message and as you kind of hone in on that, you know, as a layperson looking at those numbers, it just blows my mind that we would even be looking at this as a method of generating revenue to achieve this goal. You put a penny on the gas tax and you pay for it instantly without any of these headaches. So I would just be curious, you know, how you plan on speaking to this.
You raise a great question. The one way I can answer it is sharing my screen one more time and showing this was a slideshow turned over in response to the records request from the ODOT's financial advisors, and talking about how much in the debt capacity. And it's the foundation for those numbers that we saw earlier about how much in loans and bonds they can get based on each scenario. And one fascinating part of it was that it says for the revenue pledge, it seems to be, from my reading of it, saying we're pledging all net revenue minus 10% into the financing. And that 10% is detailed above. That's a low income toll program losses and adjustment. So I'm not a financial person per se, but it is a very good question you raised. But that's the only evidence I've been able to find about that. And there's some other things too that are more complicated, but that's my stab at answering that. But these are questions should be going to ODOT too.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas, good evening. Happy New Year, sir.
Yeah, sorry for being late, folks. Mayor, I did join right when you were beginning your presentation, so I caught it all. Great job on the numbers and your work and your public records request. I did scan through that. I had to blow up a lot, obviously, because did it on my laptop, so the screen's not very big. But it is your conclusion, or I'm going to give you my conclusion and tell me if you think that's relatively accurate, that as the rates get higher, if they were to raise the rates double, triple, whatever been even discussed, I mean, that would essentially reduce the percentage of the admin costs. Is that correct?
So you see that in scenario 2, right? The admin costs usually they're around 1.1 billion. They're down to like 968 million. So it could reduce the admin costs based on the data, it would appear.
Yeah. And the other thing I would, along that lines of thinking, that if the rates are higher, then the admin costs somewhat fixed, for the most part, would remain somewhat static while the rates went up. So you would have that percentage of admin would be reduced. Also, the fact, and you know this, that the RMPP is not yet even factored into this, which is some of that infrastructure, admin infrastructure costs would be possibly absorbed by that as well. So, I just want to point out to everyone, as we look at this in isolation, we have been presented it's been presented to us in isolation. You know, we see the point toll for the bridge, then we talk about RMPP, and we talk about something else. I mean, it's never collective. And the problem with the EA is, or probably the EA coming, is that we have not seen the combined impacts of the point toll on the bridge and or the point toll anywhere else, and also the RMPP combined. And that is what I think is, you know, just dribbling out the bad news, so to speak, because the diversion rates will go up even higher. And, you know, again, you've heard me say this before. It's not congestion relief. They don't actually succeed in reducing congestion. They only displace it from the freeway into our local roads. Let's make that perfectly clear. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Glad to see you. Ms. Pratt.
Hi, thanks for all this work, Rory. This is great. It's bad enough. You pointed out 2 columns, and it's bad enough the vendor costs are so high. But do you have any idea what the heck state and consultants operations cost is? Because that's huge. And if you're already using an outside vendor, what the heck does that supposed to cover?
It's a good question. I think I've heard Jamie might know more than me, but they're hiring some staff to help with the program that would be hired. And then also some consultants have already been profiting significantly from this. One other records request I did was for the amount of money spent on the WSP, the firm who's been doing all the engagement and analysis, and their names on the spreadsheets, as you can see the bottom left, and it's like $28 million in 2.5 years. So I'm guessing they get that's part of the process of having consultants to help with the program. But it is a shocking, when you look at the big picture, shocking to see those kind of numbers.
Mr. Myers.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for pulling all this together. And I want to state the obvious that this is explosive. This is political. This is newsworthy. Is this the first time that this information, this compilation has been done? And has it been put out yet? And is it ready to be put out into a larger media? That's my first question. The second question is, my understanding from the EA, and now the way that works is that if you do not demonstrate congestion reduction, that you cannot toll in perpetuity. You can only toll for the cost of the project. I'm wondering whether or not what they're saying about the Abernathy Bridge is that they cannot toll in perpetuity, that they have to cut it off at the end when the bridge is finished. I think that's been an important point that we've been kind of focusing on. Finally, I don't understand if the difference between the 3 scenarios is simply how much is going to be told and when. I don't understand why the administrative costs just simply wouldn't be static. There might be a slight variable, non-substantial amounts difference, but the cost should be the cost for all different scenarios. Thanks. I appreciate you putting this together again.
Mayor Milch.
About a year ago, the economist, what's his name, Paul, I think, Courtwright, in Portland, who gave some testimony concerned about if these agencies, and I don't know if it's a private agency or all federal government that provides this funding, these bonds and loans, they will want an investment grade analysis of the revenue that's projected to come in and support the payments on those bonds. So we're starting to see something closer to that with this kind of analysis. It wasn't intended to be that, but one of the other things is, just like if you want to buy a home, somebody's not going to loan money for a house that they know is going to fall apart. So a lot of the overhead on this that has to be covered with this revenue also is for the ongoing maintenance of a bridge that was built in 1970. So it's already, almost 45 years old now. 35 years from now, when these bonds are paid for, the bridge will be about 80 years old. And at that point, it will be time to build a new bridge, start over. So to Mr. Meyer's question about, how long these costs are going to incur, it really has to be in perpetuity in order to maintain the structure that is there, even after the improvements are made, because, bridges don't last forever. I am equally appreciative of the effort that you put into this to point out these numbers. Anytime, and some of these, little assumptions on interest rates and growth of costs are built into this and in the fine print of the footnotes. But anytime you assume even a small percentage of rate increase over something that's going forward for 30 to 35 years, you're going to see rapidly growing figures in many of those categories. And that's why the columns in the $6 billion range at the bottom line are so high in comparison to the relatively small amount generated at the beginning to actually do the project. So it's nice having those numbers out there, Rory. I'm really grateful to you.
Hey, thank you. One follow-up is that in the spreadsheets, you can see a couple of columns that have some of the maintenance components for the bridge. There's one routine maintenance and one column that says kind of major maintenance. It's still a very small percentage of the overall revenues.
If I can hop into just a quick note on the operations and maintenance. Currently, operations and maintenance is paid for out of the road fund, the highway trust fund, which is split 50-30-20 with counties and cities. And the shift is toward O&M through tolling, which is not proposed to be split with cities and counties. So I just want to note that. I know Mike Besner, my boss, is watching right now, and he would want to make sure you all were aware of that change. This shift could end up being problematic for many of us who depend on road fund to pay for our systems. So just want to note that, make sure it's on the record. And then quick comment, Mr. Myers, my understanding is Section 129, which is traditional tolling, can be instituted and maintained in perpetuity. It is not only allowed through the value pricing program, but also through Section 129. So we have heard that likely, for all the reasons that Mayor Milch said, this would be tolling in perpetuity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I'm going to go to Mayor Buck, and then we do have some other pieces here tonight, but this is pretty shocking to see, and I know that there's going to be more questions that I'm sure we'll need to get into Jamie's hands for getting us those answers. Mayor Buck, what do you got for us?
Well, thank you. Yeah, great information, Rory. And kind of to Jamie's point here, right? We got no matter what, tolls in perpetuity or not, these tolls are paying for this project and just this project, right? There's none of this. There's no money for any other projects, revenue sharing, and that's been one of our big points of contention. So we look at the cost, the funds that are leaving. I mean, that's kind of been one of our points here, is that just this, as the state is exploring these comprehensive options, tolling, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, the way that they're laying this out in a piecemeal fashion, which is exacerbating the diversion, right, which is exacerbating the specific impacts just to certain communities, right, is also very costly. And that's what this analysis shows, that just this method of raising, because we need revenue. And I guess my question is well, what's next now, right? So we have the bridge under construction. ODOT doesn't have money to pay for the ongoing construction, isn't that right? They can't write the checks, right? Does anyone know that?
No.
I'm sorry, construction of the bridge?
Yeah.
No, my understanding is they do not have enough money to complete the project. We've been told they would have to shift money basically away from other projects in order to do so.
So their timeline is kind of they want to get this tolling up and running, and it's not, the public will be very interested in this information, broad scope, right? Because we have the RMPP coming. They have the pre-construction tolls on the bridge going across the, the Columbia. And then the Washington County tolls on, that now they're discussing. So as a comprehensive strategy, it's starting to look like, wow, how how much money our community is going to expend on this toll, revenue, when we really need to be putting money towards transportation projects. And of course, I just can't imagine any of us, city leaders, county leaders, ever going down a road doing a project where so much of the funds would go to the administration, the cost of finance. I mean, it's ludicrous, right? So where do we go from here, knowing that we have the bridge currently under construction, and we know that that bridge project is important, and that even in the legislature are kind of more like friendly ears towards alternative revenue strategies, are like, but the Abernathy Bridge is going to get tolled. That's what we keep hearing. Like, oh, yes, there could be alternatives, but that bridge got to be tolled. So I guess what's our process going forward then?
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of things up in the air. So, okay, I'm Commissioner Savas. I guess you will be my last, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, just to help answer maybe a little bit of the mayor's question. Correct, there's not enough revenue streams as currently designed within their project funding scheme to pay for the bridge. It was relying upon the tolls to keep that going. However, the project that is stalled out because of radical increases is the big one, is the Rose Quarter. So of the HB 2017 dollars and the 10 cents that was raised, because now it's 10 cents is effective now. The last 2 cents got implemented just today or yesterday. As a result of that, there is revenue there. Jamie's correct. They can potentially adjust or shift that, but the Rose Quarter is still not shovel ready. It's not politically ready, and they added aspects to the Rose Quarter project that are legally, I'm told, not eligible for transportation funding. So the lid and all the property things that they want to do to join the neighborhoods and communities, that's not a transportation project. So therefore, by constitutionally, they can't spend money on that. So it would be challenged. So they need to find a revenue source to complete that project or to scale it back tremendously. But politically, they haven't landed in the right spot. So if they make the adjustment, they could finish the bridge. And we hope that they can actually, knowing that construction costs are going up, the smartest thing for them to do is take anything that's shovel ready and complete it. And I would argue that finishing the lanes, the 5 or 7 mile stretch of the lanes, would be an investment worthwhile, because they can get that underway without losing money as it relates to the inflationary costs that are just accelerating. So the sooner we put the money on the ground, the better off we are. That's how I see it, but I just want to kind of get to that. In the meanwhile, the legislature I know they are looking at funding. They're talking about that for 2025. And there's even some talk about trying to do something in the interim. Don't know if that will take that'll take root, but the AOC and LOC are also working on trying to help or join in that funding conversation for future projects. So there is discussion about how do we do it if we can't do it with tolls, or if we can't do it with tolls, only with tolls, what other revenue sources? So there's arguments that it could be either or both. So we'll see.
Can I Commissioner Savas, really appreciate that. I think then we have got to advocate to get the bridge done with existing funds and prevent even one. This again is just one gantry on each side, and we have got to stop that from happening, because this is just the most foolhardy plan, and we've got to get the state focused on a more comprehensive approach. Even again, the narrative that, well, maybe we can do something else, but we'll still have tolls on the bridge, just does not seem like a great plan. Going forward, it cannot be a scenario.
No, I'm in agreement with you there, Mayor Buck. Okay, well, if we get time here at the end, and if there's more questions and whatnot, Jamie, are you sticking around for the entire meeting? Okay, well, if there's anything else that comes up and we have time here at the end of the evening, or we want to discuss further, we can do that. Commissioner Savas, if you, sir, wouldn't mind taking over for a moment, I have to step away. but I will be back. So if you can introduce the next section and get us going on that.
Okay. Well, great. And in turn, I will ask Brian to lead us off.
Yeah, so I just brought in Trent Wilson to give us an update on the upcoming community meeting in Gladstone, which is an opportunity for us to raise our voice.
Thank you. And it sounds like you have a large voice to be raised. And so your next opportunity is just here on Saturday at 1 o'clock at the Gladstone High School. And so this is for the Special Subcommittee on Transportation Planning. Little context here, and most of you know this already, of course, but this subcommittee was put in place at the same time as the governor's pause on the collection of tolls. So this is the legislative side of that effort to create this subcommittee that's supposed to look under the hood, so to speak, of the toll program. And part of their work has been to go out into the community, come to you, and hear from the community how y'all are feeling about the toll programs as currently proposed. Each of these sort of community visits have had themes of sorts that they wanted to look at, and the one this weekend has these following themes for your consideration. This is in your packet, by the way. Congestion pricing and demand management, diversion mitigation, alternative transportation options, and mitigating impacts on low-income families. So they've highlighted these topics as areas that they would like to hear or receive input on. You, of course, have all been working really hard to make sure that your message is aligned and sort of coordinated around some of these topics already, of course, focusing on things like diversion and safety, alternative modes. Each of those, of course, fit within these themes in different ways. And so I think y'all should be really proud of the coordination work that y'all have been doing, both here at the elected level, through the staff group as well. There are a lot of meetings that have been going on just to make sure that we are in alignment. Good turnout at the Wilsonville meeting in December. So actually, I would say excellent turnout at the Wilsonville meeting in December, and good comments that were shared, I believe, to the subcommittee. As you consider going to this upcoming meeting, there are, number one, there are a variety of folks who have been invited to speak. So they will be at the front of this 2-hour meeting. Commissioner Savas is in that group. Several of you are in that group. And so you've gotten that email. If you've gotten that email, is sort of how that works out. But there's about a half dozen or so folks who have been invited to testify at the front. They'll get 4 minutes to testify. Everybody else will get 2 minutes. And if it's anything like the Wilsonville community meeting, it will be packed. So I recommend, if you're interested in testifying, show up early and get on the list, because I think it will fill up rather quick. And they didn't quite get to the 2-hour mark at the Wilsonville meeting, but they got really close, and that room was very full. So I think that the community around this particular geography will be maybe even a little bit more invested. And so it could fill up pretty fast. If you want to be on the list, show up early, please. And we've talked about this meeting for a variety of times. What I would encourage you to do, if you are thinking about testifying, is look at that chart that's in the packet here. It's after page 24, and notice how we've sort of framed a lot of those recommendations. You've framed a lot of those recommendations to be questions for ODOT. So think about it this way. You are asking this subcommittee, who is doing a deep dive on the toll program, you're asking them to say, hey, what is ODOT's plan for A, B, and C? Take your concerns that you're sharing now, ask this subcommittee to put those questions in front of ODOT. And I think that's this subcommittee's job. So helpful to think about, what is this subcommittee's job? Their job is to take this input, take deep dives in their next meetings. Their next meeting, by the way, is next Wednesday morning. So they're going to go from these community meetings into their next meeting just a few days later. Take these comments and say, what do we do with all this? And what do we recommend at the end of our set of meetings, which they've sort of scheduled out to happen at the end of the short session. So late February, early March. Use these questions. I would say try to leave the subcommittee with these questions so that they can go back and say, hey, what I heard was, what's ODOT's plan to solve this problem? Oh, there's community concerns about A, B, and C, about diversion, about safety, about being diverted into alternative modes, but there are no alternative modes, or there are limited alternative modes. Frame it in that way so that this subcommittee can then put those questions to ODOT. If ODOT can answer those questions in a reasonable way to them, then maybe they've done their job. If they're not able to do that by the end of February, then I think that would put the subcommittee in a hard position to say that they should or shouldn't recommend the program to move forward as it's currently proposed. So think about what is the task of this committee as you're getting ready to prepare your remarks. I think that this question approach, leaving them with like something to solve, gives them work to do in the short term to have ODOT prepare, to invite ODOT in and try to get them to answer these questions that you're asking yourselves. And so giving them the data, giving them the information, leaving them with that thought, putting them in a position to ask the questions that they need to ask ODOT to see if whether or not ODOT can justify that this project is relevant to move forward or not. I know you all have your own strong feelings about this, as we've talked about already today and many meetings before. This subcommittee doesn't have the same background or history as you have had. They've had a much more truncated experience with the toll project, and most of them from districts and jurisdictions that are not going to be impacted by tolling in the same way that yours will be. And so use your expertise, use this knowledge that you've gained to jump in there and give them quick details. Again, if you're on that short list of being able to have 4 minutes, you only get 2 minutes. That's a really short period of time. Mayor Hodson, we were talking about your 2 minutes at Wilsonville and how quick it went. It happens really fast. Obviously, you're really passionate about this topic, and so that adds to the pressure in that moment. And this is a really important opportunity that you've been asking for, to be in front of the state legislature and put these concerns on the record. So I'm happy to take questions about the subcommittee as it is, but we've talked about it a lot. Materials are there in there. If you're not able to testify, they will take written testimony, so you can submit that into the committee. Strongly recommend thinking about that, even if you are going to do a verbal testimony.
Trent, just to let everyone know again, that is this Saturday. It is at Gladstone High School. Is that yes? Gladstone High School auditorium, and it starts at 1 o'clock. So 1 to 2 are for invited speakers, and then 2 to 3 is for those that want to sign in and be a part of it. To Trent's point, yes, 2 minutes goes very quickly. If it's been a while since you've been on the receiving end of being able to give testimony in front of a city council or a committee like this, yeah, it's lightning fast. So if you can make it, please do so. I would get there at least an hour early. The one in Wilsonville was standing room only, out into the hallway in the lobby area of City Hall. So get there, get signed up, and give your 2 minutes, or as Trent just said, email it in. Unfortunately, I have a funeral that day, so I will not be able to be there this time, but I will be submitting my written testimony to be there, at least that it's there, and maybe include some of the new pieces that were shared tonight. So, yeah, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Mayor, you said it, but I just want to amplify it a little bit. At the Wilsonville event, it was pretty hectic in there as people were coming in either close to or after the testimony began. And some people that wanted to speak, I learned, weren't aware that there was a sign-up sheet or a sign-up opportunity. So search that out when you get there, and being there in advance would assure that you got some space. I've been to all 3 of the meetings so far. This is the last of the 4. And if the invited guest, that first hour, only takes 30 minutes and there's 30 minutes remaining, that'll be rolled into the hour and a half then for the 2-minute testimony. So there won't be a break in between. It'll just continue. You'll go from the invited guest at 4 minutes to anyone else who wants to speak at 2 minutes. Thus far, even the Wilsonville one, which I thought would go the full 2 hours with testimony, it actually ended about 10 minutes early because there was no more testimony or people stepping up. So my guess is that this might be the exception, this particular one, because of all the interest, and we're so close to the heart of the diversion that we'll probably have a lot of people want to speak. But I just want to amplify what the mayor said. Be prepared. That 2 minutes goes fast, and practice. And by the way, if you don't want to speak, again, amplify again, submit the testimony. And there's a limited time for that. I don't know what the date is, but each of the meetings I've been at have been on the weekend. with the exception of Wilsonville. And even the one in Wilsonville, they said they have until a date 2 or 3, 4 days afterwards to submit that, which is not typical for the legislature, but this is a unique thing. So don't quote me on that, but I think it'd be strange for them to say the deadline to submit testimony ends on a Sunday for 20, it'll be 24 hours later on a Sunday. So Trent, have you got any more information on that?
Yes, it's 48 hours after, so you'll have until 1 p.m. on Monday.
Okay. Okay. There you go. There you have it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this one, Mr. Wilson?
Go and do good work. This is your chance. This is what you've been asking for.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I guess we'll be moving in then to legislative update in 2024 legislative session outlook. Again, that's Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, shout out to my friend and former colleague Chris Lyons. I'm missing his time here at the county, but it's me now. So here we go. The upcoming short session, if they have it in full, will focus really on 2 main priorities for the legislature. And you've heard this loud and clear, I think, by many legislators who are making the rounds, or if you attended the business summit in early December, it's going to be housing production. That's a governor's priority, consistent with those executive orders that she introduced in her first couple of months in term. And then also trying to do something with Measure 110. And so I think the legislature has heard loud and clear, especially on the public safety side, that Measure 110 needs some work, and they're gonna take a run at trying to do something. And some of that is still unclear, but I think what we've heard is that a lot of it will be around public consumption and public use, and trying to find ways to either curb or eliminate public use of illicit drugs or harmful drugs. A lot of that's, what you see on those public transit systems. And so trying to find ways to at least improve the safety or improve the perception of safety in some of those spaces, as well as, in communities or businesses and public areas that are affecting the economy. And so those are a few major priorities, not to mention just the issues of harm itself that come with some of those drugs, and helping people move towards care and sort of adjustments. So those would be the 2 big pieces, with the housing production bill that's going to come with some money. And I think that's going to be about, I believe it's $500 million in targeted requests from the governor's office to focus on housing production. There's a wide range of how those dollars are going to be allocated, but it will become more clear as the session begins. The way that I understand it so far is that those $500 million will create like areas that people or programs or agencies or businesses can apply into in order to receive them. It's not going to be earmarked necessarily in the short session. And if that changes, I'll let you know. You'll hear it from us. So those are the 2 big topics. It's a short session. It's 35 days. It starts on February 5. It ends on March 10. So it'll go really quick. Still a lot of uncertainty around whether the effects of last year's walkout and the ongoing lawsuit will impact attendance at this upcoming session. So that is a lingering question mark, but they will still have, go through the motion of putting the bills together, going through the motions of having the committee meetings. One of those committees, as we were just talking about, is the special subcommittee on transportation planning. So I wanted to flag that for y'all. They're the one that we just talked about with the community meetings. They will keep meeting, through the short session. And their goal is to have maybe 5 or 6 more meetings between now and the end of the short session in order to reach whatever their recommendation will be. And so think about that. More locally at Clackamas County, our number 1 priority will be to try to go and achieve the remainder of the state obligation for the county courthouse. And so that's what we'll be working on as well, making sure that that project, which is, by the way, on time and on budget, looks really cool. Come up to the offices and see it. It'll be open in the summer of 2025, but we still need the state legislature's help to, close the gap there on that state match funding. And I guess maybe my final note here is that a lot of our work, and maybe the work of this group here too, will be to focus on 2025. And there is an anticipated transportation package that a lot of legislators are working towards for 2025, where they will most likely be trying to accomplish, I'll say it this way, most transportation packages have made some financial adjustments in order to fund projects. But I think the looming need now is, of course, this funding cliff that ODOT is experiencing, but also we all share the same bucket of funds, right? 50, 30, 20. It's also our funding cliff as well as it relates to the gas tax. And so there is a lot of momentum right now and interest. I'm not going to say it's not a heavy lift, but there's interest in trying to address this funding question and how to create funding stability for transportation and infrastructure moving into the future. And another way of saying that, how to shift away from the gas tax and move towards how we should fund transportation issues in the future. Everything's on the table. Nothing's off the table right now. That includes tolling, but that also includes vehicle miles traveled, fees, cordon pricing. If you've heard of a funding mechanism for transportation, it's on the table. And I want to be very clear about that. In the next week or two, Representative McLean, who's one of the co-chairs for the Joint Committee on Transportation, she's a leader in this conversation, will be releasing a framework for the approach to 2025 and how they'll try to make decisions in 2025. So we'll be on the lookout for that. That will be very informative about the different areas to engage on, the types of money that they're going to talk about, the types of needs that exist at state and local levels, county levels, city levels. So let's be on the lookout for that on how that unpacks. And I'll just add too, and we'll talk a little bit about this at C4 Metro Subcommittee, JPACT will also have a part to play in some of this. Leading up to the 2017 transportation package, JPACT did a lot of work to create regional alignment on what our goals were within the Tri-County area. And so out of that work came the Rose Quarter 205 project and 217 projects, which, as you know, got the most attention in that House Bill 2017. Some good reasons, and obviously, as we were just talking about, some heartburn and some of the outcomes there. But the project and the need for the project and the third lane, at least for the Clackamas County project, still stood out. There's still a lot of motivated legislators to complete those projects. And so I believe that the 2025 package will also focus on making good on the promises of those bottleneck projects, which were of statewide significance. Recall that in 2016, the governor did a roadshow and heard at every corner of Oregon that those 3 bottleneck projects affected everybody who comes into the region. That's a really big deal. And so that interest has not fully gone away. And there's still, I think, interest, and I would say maybe champions to see that those projects get funded. So a lot still to shake out going through the next 12 months in order to get to the next legislative session. So right now we're trying to just focus on the next 2 months, this upcoming short session, probably about 300 bills, because, you know, we all need 300 new laws in our life. But seeing what the legislature gives us to think about and chew on and advocate for or against based on the interest of our communities.
Thank you, Trent. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. And this is just with just reflecting back in 2016 when, you know, the Governor Brown then Governor Brown did her tour. Shortly after that was completed, the local region was tasked with a request from a member of the Joint Transportation Commission to, hey, Metro Region, tell us what you want tell us what you all agree on and what you would want for a package. And that's out of that came the 3 bottlenecks in HB 2017. And my learned lesson from that, because I was one of those people that we met every Friday at Multnomah County, at the Multnomah County building. We met almost every Friday and worked on that, and then submitted the 3 bottlenecks a couple months before sine die. And the learned lesson out of that was, and since then, is that a lot of these legislators that were there then are not there today. So attrition is normal, just like our city councils, attrition is normal. And not only that, but they don't know our territory, right? They're statewide. And what we've learned from giving tours to people is that these legislators had no idea about the unique aspects of the 205 corridor, no transit. The roads are rural. Frankly, in rural, they're not improved roads. There's no bike path. There's major safety issues. There's major geographical issues, rivers, cliffs, barriers. They had no idea. They just thought it was a bridge to somewhere, though they had some familiarity, so not all, but some. And not only that, the other learned lesson is that when I talked to legislators, they'd either voted for HB 2017 or voted for HB 3055. They didn't understand what they were voting on. At least that's what they said in hindsight. So I think it's imperative, and you heard me say this before, I'm going to say it again. I was very upset, obviously, when we were denied an opportunity to have hearings. So Trent, I don't, that's a big burden for all of us to convey. I just wondered if we, not tonight, but we consider C4 saying we want an opportunity to talk to you all, whether it's 2025 conversation or it's a 2024 conversation, but we don't want to be left out because they could have made a wiser decision had they been better informed with local voices on these local projects, though they had statewide significance. We're in this mess, I think, because they were not fully informed.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that there will be, and this is optimistic Trent talking, I think that there will be some opportunities to do that. These community meetings that this special subcommittee on transportation planning are having, I think are a result of an organic pressure being released, that there wasn't these opportunities to talk, and that put pressure on the legislature to try to pause things and slow things down and get that feedback. And so I think what we're experiencing right now is at least maybe that first opportunity. And then we've heard Representative McLean say that there will be another roadshow here in 2024 specific to this 25 package. And so I think that that will also create some opportunities to speak. And then I'm just thinking about a meeting this morning where Metro President Peterson, former Clackamas County Commissioner, but Metro President Peterson was talking with folks on the west side of the region. And they're talking about a transportation and mobility study that they just produced. It's in the news. You can look it up. It's interesting. And, it's recommending that they consider tolling on Highway 26 and other parts of the western side of the region. Very interesting stuff. And her comment was, wouldn't things be different if they had just included the community in a study like this before they started just mandating things on I-205? And that's not verbatim, but I mean, that was kind of the message that she was relaying to that small transportation committee for the West Side Economic Alliance. And I mean, I think that there are principals in the region and even at the legislature who are feeling that need, that we have to have more alignment, more conversations, more congruity. And obviously that's our message too. So that will at least be coming from us at a minimum, but I'm hearing it from other folks. I don't think we'll be alone in the region for that.
Mayor Milch.
I tend to be a glass half full kind of guy, so I agree with Trent's assessment and optimism about there being a lot more involvement from the community on these upcoming issues. And to Commissioner Savis's point on not knowing what's going on in other parts of the state, I can't remember where it was, but it may have been a state legislature meeting that I watched or some presentation somewhere else. But I get concerned about these large area-wise counties in the rural parts of our state that have hundreds of miles of roads and populations in the just a few thousand. If we look at other sources of funding revenue for transportation in the state, and we go to, say, a vehicle miles traveled tax or fee, is it fair to charge the person who has to drive 100 miles just to get to a doctor appointment the same as we charge the people who live in the metropolitan communities? And I think some of this conflict that we see between rural and urban communities and representatives has to do with those differences that we're just not aware of. It's a completely different world out there from where we live in the metro center here. And the more that we can, like Commissioner Savis said, the more that we can understand the other and do our planning and our policy making with an awareness of those differences and an understanding of them and a desire for greater equity for the different segments of the population that live in different places, I think the better we are going to be, and the less likely we're going to have these walkouts and other things. If the perception of much of the state is that everything is built around the metro region, that's not going to work for one Oregon. And so I'm hoping that we'll have more of these opportunities to talk and share, and that we'll do it in a way that tries to be equitable to all parts of the state.
Mayor Kaiser, I see that hand.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that a majority of our state is forgetting is the Capitol is the only place in the state that does not have to deal with audits. The money does not have to be audited, such as like our cities do and everything else. And they've announced this year that they're giving back how much money in a kicker, but yet they don't have any money for funding. They don't have any money to fix our roads. How many of anybody here tonight has seen those little stripes going down our roads showing that they've de-iced it? And we've had some pretty cold mornings. You know, if they're going to be handing us back all this, or the state back all this money, especially coming into an election year, and they're talking about changing it into a check, you know, it's great that we're looking at, you know, who's paying what and this and that. But I think we need to start looking at somebody holding the state accountable and audits on their funding and making sure that, hey, maybe they need to start using all the money they're getting, because the kicker is not an overtax. The kicker is money that they decided not to budget for. And we all figure out how much money every year we're going to get as cities. We budget it. We use every penny we get. If not, we save. But the state is the only one that is not held accountable for this money. And they're handing back all this money back to the voters this year. And this money could be going toward ODOT. This could be taking a chunk out of what they want for tolling and help, maybe even maintaining some of our highways that haven't been touched in over 15 years.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner West.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
So what we recently in November, we at the Association of Oregon Counties, this topic came up. And there was a panel with representatives, and some of the representatives were from the east side of the state. And it was clear to me that they, I mean, to be frank, one of them said, hey, you know, if tolling pulls more money out of the metro area and then we revenue share it back to our rural county, our rural districts, we're totally fine with that. And so we support tolling. And then I looked at him and I said, you don't understand. You're not going to get any revenue sharing because that's off the table. There's no revenue sharing. And that House Bill 2017 really allows the ODOT to really toll the whole state. So they're going to start tolling you too. And so I think like understanding, as this is where we may have advocates that still don't fully understand a complicated topic that we're dealing with every single day, and that is in front of us right now and that we've talked about often. And you know, we have the meetings in Gladstone and Wilsonville, the subcommittee meetings. I think there's an opportunity there to help build a coalition within the legislature that still needs a little bit further understanding about how this has a statewide negative impact, and understanding where they're coming from too, and how Clackamas County has some similarities to some of the rural counties having the largest rural population in the state. Like Commissioner's office said, all the rural roads and the we don't have the access to the mass transit and the other alternatives. So all of those things I think are important. But as we have this conversation moving forward, going into the short session with different legislators, I think it's important to help paint the accurate picture of how this isn't just a metro area problem or a greater Portland area problem. This really is an ill-advised kind of scheme that's not working to fund transportation, and we have to be more creative. So I don't know, I thought that was an interesting perspective that I got out of AOC, just talking with a lot of the different legislators from around the state, where I'd almost thought or assumed that they would be opposed to tolling, but they needed to have a conversation needed to happen because they initially weren't or aren't.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, any other comments leading into the session here or questions for Trent before moving into updates and other business?
Yeah, I just have one, to Mayor Milch's point, and also to Commissioner West, we hear a lot from our rural colleagues around the state. And I think there's a little bit of a misnomer in the sense that, maybe that's not the right word, but a misunderstanding. I don't think there's a great benefit. It's almost like the 205 project. We don't want the 205 project because we want an extra lane for the sake of wanting an extra lane. We're doing it because of the diversion and the safety hazards it's creating. I would prefer, that we didn't have all the traffic on the freeways and the freeway system here. It's not a gift to have a corridor, whether it's I-5 or 205 or 217 or Highway 26, dividing our communities and having all that stuff. It serves the population, obviously. It serves for all the supplies and services that come and go. So I disagree with the premise that somehow the metro region benefits with these bottleneck projects. No, we're suffering because of the underinvestment made in our highway system and the lack of capacity. We're the victims here. And the state benefits, just like Governor Brown heard in 2016, the state benefits from a free moving system for people to get their goods and services and farm products all the way up here to the port and back. So it's not a benefit to have a 3-lane or a 6-lane or a 10-lane freeway going down your community. In and of itself. That's all I just wanted to say. Just commentary.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Savas. Hey, I do just want to maybe add on to what Commissioner West was alluding to with our rural communities, and Commissioner Savas did a little bit of it too. And I think that goes to, in order for the legislature to be successful in 2025 with the transportation package, it will need to be a statewide improvement program. It will not be successful if it's just a regional program. It's going to have to include everything across the state. And I think that will be true for legislators too. You're seeing it right now that ODOT's O&M is currently even struggling just to do the snow plowing over in Eastern Oregon. That problem is not going to go away based on how they are currently set up. And so, that will bring pressure from the east side of the state and will require that Republican legislators on that side of the state get something, or find some confidence or assurance that the proposed program in 2025 will be a balanced proposal. And so it'll be challenging. I by no means is this a shoe-in or something that we should expect to just happen in 2025. It'll be complicated and it will require a lot of engagement as well as some patience along the way, saying hard things, but also coming to the table with ideas. And y'all have done a really good job of doing that. Y'all have a lot of practice with this topic on tolling in particular. And so I think y'all are pretty prepared for some of these conversations ahead. Yes, Mayor B.
Hey, thanks. Just to add on to that, I feel my feeling on transportation funding is that the state's at kind of a crossroads here. Because on one hand, you've got, and I've been thinking about this for months, you've got ODOT trying to accomplish all these major billions and billions of dollars in projects in the Portland metro area, but then at the same time, they can't cover their, they have to ask for more money to just plow roads. So, it's like you have to do one or the other, feels like to me, rather than try to figure out a way to do everything at the same time. It's very overwhelming, stressful financially for everybody. So 2 cents, but anyway, thanks.
And just kind of to follow up on that, I think in the last fiscal year, the state gas tax revenue was around 670 million. So when you compare that to the size of the projects, we've got to keep thinking of alternative funding sources to suggest besides tolling as we talk to them, I think.
For sure. Okay. Well, thank you all for that. We're gonna quickly get through updates here before we can get it, so we can get out of here. Any JPAC updates?
The JPAC meeting, we had a presentation on the safety, what was it called here? Safe Streets for All Transportation Safety update. So it was a good discussion, actually, and it's more along the lines of the safe streets aspects. We definitely talked a lot about injuries, accidents, and fatalities. But the highlight of the morning was the presentation that Jamie Stasny did on behalf of Clackamas County, and that was the Sunrise Corridor Visioning Project that was presented, and well received, well done, and it was really, I think, the first time where we really got to highlight all the great things we want to see and do in that corridor, and showcase it. So good job, Jamie. And I don't have an agenda yet for this coming JPAC meeting, but stay tuned.
Okay. What about an impact update?
I can take that one. MFAC at the last meeting, they gave an update on the buildable lands inventory. They do their study every 20 years to assess available land. I mean, an example would be east side of Happy Valley and into former Damascus. There are about 4,100 acres of available land. Problem is, though, that it doesn't seem that with kind of the overarching infrastructure and jurisdiction that there's going to be development of much of that land, so it doesn't get included as part of that kind of overall mix as developable land. The other thing we covered was Sherwood West concept plan. They're looking to create a bit of an expansion over there to accommodate that, and I think that's about 1,300 acres that they're planning. So those were the two main updates at the last MPAC meeting. Thanks.
Great, thank you, sir. In your packet is the 2024 meeting schedule and membership updates. So please take a look at that in your packet. Plug those important dates into your calendar, and yeah, so you don't miss one of these great and very important meetings here in the year of 2024.
Can I just jump in? Can I just jump in and mention that that should have been a draft calendar? We're actually having an executive meeting on Monday to confirm that calendar. One thing to note: we do have a normally scheduled C4 meeting on July 4th, so the executive committee will have a conversation about whether rescheduling that, or we would like to schedule another retreat this year. So that's another topic that we'll talk about with the exec committee and be sharing with you all as an update for our calendar ahead.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. All right. Any other business for the good of the order? Going once, twice. All right. Sold. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Sherry, you got it. Is there a second? Great. Thank you, Brett. All right. All those in favor? All right. Well, we're done. Everyone, have a great evening, and I hope your start to 2024 is awesome. I'll see you all in February, okay? Bye.